Dan. Hey, Rodrigue.
Hey, Lisa, friend.
It's so good to see y'all today. Happy holidays and Happy New Year. We took a little bit of a break to tend to our families and to ourselves and to set intentions going into this new year. And we're so excited to be back with you to talk about different cultural and spiritual pathways and knowledge ways for tending to the climate crisis and to ourselves. And so I wanted to kick us off by introducing one of my favorite thinkers, who is Joanna Macy. And Joanna Macy really is well known in circles related to responding to climate crisis. And she works in the realm of despair work, thinking about how we can metabolize our personal and collective grief and transform it into active hope. And so I wanted to give a bit of framing for how she gets there. And the first thing to know about her work is that she believes there are 3 different stories available to us in this time. And each of those stories is a different way for a person or community to approach climate crisis and our collective risks and threats to our well-being. And so those stories are, the first one is business as usual. The idea that what we're doing is working and we want more of the same, more consumption, more production, and we're gauging our value and our well-being based on the performance of the market and the economy. And then the second story she introduces is this idea of the great unraveling, which I think of as like the sky is falling. We're in an apocalypse. Everything is coming to an end. We're in runaway crisis, and there's really nothing that we can do. And so we should just buckle up. And, you know, it's a bit of an end of the world framework. And Joanna Macy says that both of those are forms of bypassing, and they're ways of basically sitting in apathy. They allow us to step away from the reality of what's going on and our agency in that situation. And so her belief is there's a third story available to us. And that third story is called The Great Turning. And the Great Turning has been used by a lot of philosophers and theologians over the years to craft a new way forward. And it's one that really influences our team and the work that we're doing. And so I wanted to just read one little quote from her about the power of story and the ability to take a story and transition into new practice. So she says, in choosing our story, we not only cast our vote of influence over the kind of world future generations inherit, but we also affect our own lives in the here and now. When we find a good story and fully give ourselves to it, that story can act through us, breathing new life into everything we do. When we move in a direction that touches our heart, we add to the momentum of deeper purpose that makes us feel more alive. A great story and a satisfying life share one vital element, a compelling plot that moves toward meaningful goals, where what is at stake is far larger than our personal gains and losses. The Great Turning is such a story. And as we sit together and we have these conversations, BioEarth really believes that this story and this pathway is available to us, and we step fully into that through our actions and our work. The Great Turning is an opportunity to bring together science and spirituality, to understand that there is suffering and grief and despair in the midst of climate crisis. But by feeling that and utilizing cultural and spiritual knowledge, ways, and rituals, we can actually move it through our bodies and into a place of compassionate understanding. And Joanna Macy says that deep well of compassion and interconnection is what activates hope, and not just hope, but moving forward, taking steps toward making sustainable, resilient change. And so it's a way to get out of the apathy that's triggered when we sit in despair and climate crisis. And it moves us toward making that change a reality.
Liz, I'm really struck by how insightful Macy is in speaking about how both that really optimistic sort of business as usual inclination and that really pessimistic, the sky is falling kind of option, both lead to inaction. And that the turning is what leads to active hope, which leads to action. And I'm reminded in Judaism of how turning is the same word as repentance, teshuvah, right? You turn when you realize that you're going down the wrong path, you turn, but the meaning of true repentance is that you no longer do that thing that you're repenting of. If you continue to do it, you never really did repent. So you turn and you change, and then you go forward.
And what came to my mind the whole time that you were talking was a Swahili proverb that says Mutu ni Watu, which means a person is people. So Mutu means a person, and Watu means people. And this is in present. So Mutu ni Watu, person is people. And the meaning behind it is that no man is an island. So every man needs a company, need other people to help him, And in my opinion, I think the Swahili version of our calling to be there for ourselves and others. So is why we have chosen to be there for other people, for ourselves, for our communities, for our friends. And we need the help of one another to go through what we are facing right now as a globe, as a challenge, as a world. We share the same planet and all its benefits together. The global struggles, the global challenges face all of us. So we are called to be able to bring together and forward global solutions that everybody contributes to, young, old, men, women, and all living creature, for the benefit of everybody and all of us on this planet. So it's always great to explore your purpose and your duty as an individual, but also to understand how collectively your purpose, your mission, your duty can impact everybody, but also can be contributed to. This idea is one of the things that brought me to understanding that I need other people. So it's not only myself. I'm not at the center of the universe. I need other people in my life. I need other creatures, other human beings in my life. And I have to embrace the idea of collectiveness so that I can understand the difference, the diversity, the gifts and the resources that everybody bring forward to be sufficient, and not only self-sufficient but collectively sufficient as a community. So this is how I understand it from the not only the Congolese perspective but from the community perspective. So it's like I know that being in this space with you, Liz, and friend, gives me the opportunity to learn from you, from your experience, to grow as you grow, to also share what I have as experience and background, so that together we can have this rich life experience from different perspective and background.
That really makes me think a lot just about the Buddhist principle of interconnection, and that idea that everything is always connected at every level of reality. And I love that the Swahili kind of framing for that, recognizes that concept exists across cultures, across identities, and that is also reflected in our scientific understandings. So that's beautiful. Thank you, Rodrigue.
Thank you.
Well, and that's a perfect segue to what I wanted to share today. As a religion scholar, of course, I'm deeply aware of the richness that various cultures and traditions, really all of them that I can think of, have to offer regarding personal and ecological resiliency. And it's not limited to one religion or just a few religions. This has been really vividly shown by the Yale Forum on Religion and Ecology, which we'll have a link to on our website of BioEarth Community, headed by Mary Evelyn Tucker and John Grimm, which is really a source for delving into that wisdom from many, many, many different religious traditions regarding ecological resiliency. But today, I want to talk about and share with everybody the greatest environmental writing of our lifetimes, in my opinion, which is by Pope Francis. And it was his second encyclical letter, Laudato Si, on care for our common home. Laudato Si means praise be to you. And Pope Francis addresses this to every person living on the planet. So this isn't just from Catholics to Catholics. This is for every single person living on the planet. And for starters, it's one of the most concise and accurate analyses of the dangers and problems facing our planet that I know of. He takes us through climate change, through the dangers of pollution, water scarcity, especially for those living in the global south, the threat of the loss of biodiversity. In fact, he mentions Congo, Rodrigue, speaking about the importance of preserving, quote, the richly biodiverse lungs of our planet, which are the Amazon and the Congo basins. He even speaks about how ecological debt is disproportionately carried by the poor, especially those living in the global south. And an example of this is, the minerals in your computer or your cell phone, which were very likely mined in Congo by people facing very difficult health conditions, physical safety conditions, and low wages. And many of those miners, those artisanal miners, were likely children. But Pope Francis goes further than just listing the problems that we're facing, and he tries to find the root of the problem. And he names the basic problem in a way that I just find to be incredibly insightful and wise for anyone in any tradition. And he says that it's the way that humanity has taken up technology and its development. And by technology, he also means material industrial society, according to what he calls a, quote, undifferentiated and one-dimensional paradigm. And here it is. Subject controlling object. And he applies it to every realm that you can think of, and to show that this is really a false paradigm, that the notion that I, a human being, because we place ourselves in an anthropocentric way, he says, at the center, making ourselves egoistically the subject, believe that I can control technology. We've seen it get out of control. Believe that we can control economic life and harness it for profit, control politics and political life, control other people, control ecological life. And he explains that this is false. It doesn't work. That we think that by controlling these other beings, that we're going to obtain happiness, which we do not. Instead, we obtain isolation, division, a kind of spiritual corruptness, an emptiness that material goods cannot fill. And we become bereft spiritually. And we also even can't control nature. And I'll just step out of this encyclical for a minute to say we're still living through the COVID pandemic. And most studies are concluding that whether it's this coronavirus or another coronavirus, this is caused by humankind's destruction of natural habitat. And then animals mutate in their RNA and their DNA as they're struggling to survive, and then this jumps species, right? So the idea that we can control these things for profit, for gain, so that I can have more, so that I can be happy, is an illusion on every level. It's not possible. And even if it were possible, it wouldn't breed happiness. And so what he does is to speak about liberation from that paradigm. That what we require on a deeper level, if that is the root of the problem, is to be liberated from that paradigm. And therefore he talks about another paradigm. And the paradigm that he speaks about, he doesn't quite put it this way, but I'll call it relationality. He turns to the biblical resources, just as I did in another Root.ED conversation, to say that we've forgotten that we're the dust of the earth. Genesis 2:7.
Dirtlings.
Dirtlings. That we're made of the elements of the earth, that we breathe in air, that we drink water. And this change of paradigm, he turns to his patron saint and the one who shares my name, which is St. Francis, who spoke about being in relation to all the rest of nature, and who speaks about being in relationship. And this is one of these deep resources that I think that the Pope is offering to us, but is available to everyone regardless of their religion or non-religion, which is to turn back to other parts of nature for that resiliency. When you find yourself depleted, when you find yourself thinking this is too big of a problem, that's the well that you can turn back to in order to fill yourself up. The Pope says it's like falling in love, which I kind of love. And he says it's like falling in love with someone through the relationship that one has with other parts of nature. And he speaks about this not as an object to be used or discarded, as he speaks about our throwaway culture, but also not an object to be praised or worshipped, but rather as a co-subject, somebody to be in relationship with. And this is the insight that he gains from St. Francis, who spoke about every creature as our brother and our sister.
That's very reflective, Fran, of the talk and the conversation we had about Buber, Martin Buber, and the I-thou relationship, and that stepping out of objectification. So that just, I love that St. Francis, the Pope, and Buber are all echoing that same language. And I'm wondering if I could offer another Joanna Macy quote that speaks to this as well. So in The Act of Hope, Joanna Macy says, at the core of our consciousness is a wellspring of caring and compassion. This aspect of ourselves, which we might think of as our connected self, can be nurtured and developed. When we can deepen our sense of belonging in the world, like trees extending their root system, we can grow in connection, thus allowing ourselves to draw from a deeper pool of strength, accessing the courage and intelligence we so greatly need right now. This dimension of the great turning arises from shifts taking place in our hearts, in our minds, and in our views of reality. It involves insights and practices that resonate with venerable spiritual traditions, while in alignment with revolutionary new understandings from science.
It is Mutu ni Watu. You know, not just a person is a people like other human beings, but a person is also interconnected with, situated with, a part of animal people, tree people, or as St. Francis put it, brother, sun, and sister moon. I'd like to share another quote by the Pope from Laudato Si, which resonates really strongly with everything that you both have just said. This is in paragraph 139. When we speak of the environment, what we really mean is a relationship existing between nature and the society which lives in it. Nature cannot be regarded as something separate from ourselves. We are part of nature. And so I completely agree that points us to a kind of reclaiming of wisdom in the biblical traditions that hasn't always been recognized, for the most part, wasn't recognized. Genesis was read very differently in terms of dominion. But I think what Laudato Si is doing is setting us in alignment again with that original vision. But it's a vision that Indigenous religions have had for a long, long time. And I'd like to finally share a few insights from Hawaiian Indigenous religion, and the notion of lokahi, which is the central, I'd say, ethic of Hawaiian religion. Lokahi, sort of like Mutu ni Watu, says that harmony, balance between all the different parts is the supreme goal. That when there is disharmony of any kind, because maybe I'm placing myself as a subject, trying to control nature or trying to control other people, trying to exploit them, trying to get something for myself, it is not going to make me happy, and it's not going to make anyone else happy because there's disharmony. There has to be a balance. And one of the things that reminds me constantly of what is involved in thinking about lokahi are the creation myths. So since I've mentioned Genesis from the Bible, let me give fair time to creation myths from Indigenous religion and Hawaiian religion. And like a lot of religions, there isn't just one creation myth, there are multiple. This is also the case in Genesis, by the way. Multiple creation myths that function together to create some kind of meaning. And so I'd like to tell you two. In the first one, in the first Hawaiian creation myth, Black Night gave rise to day, which gave rise to coral, which gave rise to sea life, which gave rise to the plants and the animals, which gave rise to, now wait for it, the deities, the divine beings.
Oh, wow. So coral brought the deities. That's fascinating.
That's right. And then they gave rise to the chiefly ancestors of the Hawaiian people, and then they gave rise to the generations of the people. So in thinking about your relationship to all of that, there's this primacy of place that you give to sea life and to coral, which makes sense for an island nation.
Yeah.
And then in another creation myth, Father Sky, Wakea, and the maker of stars, Ho'oho Kukolani, had a baby. But the baby was stillborn, and they buried the baby. But what came up when they buried the baby was the kalo plant, taro, basically, which is a staple food. And then they had another baby together, and that baby became the chiefly ancestor of the Hawaiian people.
Wow.
Which means that the indigenous Hawaiians would think about their major plant that they cultivated and food stuff that gave them food as a sibling.
An elder sibling.
An elder sibling. That's right. Deserving of respect, right? Literally, like St. Francis was saying, a brother or a sister. Therefore, in Hawaiian, you would say aloha, which doesn't just mean like bye or hi. It means love and respect. And you would say aloha aina first, which is love and respect the land. Then you say aloha ke'akua, love and respect the gods. Then you say aloha kekahi I kekahi, love and respect one another. So the ecological and the divine and the social are all intertwined, but the basis of it is the aina, is the land. All right, starting with the land or the sea or the coral, but that's the foundation of everything else. So when I think about my resiliency and I think about going to these traditions for strength and for wisdom, so that we can take some of the practical steps that we're going to talk about in later Root.ED conversation episodes, I think about the way that I can start by reflecting on myself. Am I operating out of ego? Am I operating out of self-centeredness? Am I operating out of fear? And then relationality. What's my relation then to the divine, to another person, to an animal, to a tree? What's my relationality? Am I relating to them as an object, which is only going to result in my own suffering, or another subject, which is going to give me wisdom, help me learn, help me grow, and ultimately sustain us both?
We are all interconnected, and therefore we have to value and understand each other and how to live in harmony on the planet. So yeah, love that.
Well, thank you so much for joining us for this week's episode of Rooted Conversations. This is such a rich time together, and we really are grateful for your participation and your engagement. Next week, we're going to talk more about some practical skills and tools and rituals to apply to these situations. So how do we move into active spaces and away from our apathy and our pain? And that's something that I think is so valuable as we enter this new year and we think toward what sort of story we want to adopt as a collective and as individuals. Thanks for joining us. Take care. Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye. Thank you.